I'm David Hunt. My next guest is an artist, an art director, a curator, and a collector of stuff. His name is Andrew Delaney. Hello, Andrew.
David, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I can't wait to explain to people what the stuff is that you collect, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Let's start way back because I know you're really old. No, you're not. No one's as old as me. So let's start way back. You, as a kid, a country boy, where from?
Down in Western Victoria, a little place called Mortlake. So born and bred on a farm, free range.
What was life at school like for you? Did you enjoy school? Did you realize there might have been something a little bit special about you, like being maybe gay at school? Or when did all that experience and coming out, did it happen at school?
Oh lordy. Primary school was horrendous. We were taught by nuns, Catholic school, and of course you pick up uh, certain aspects of that when you're growing up, and it's not obviously gay positive. We also had to deal with a pedophile priest that went
Oh,
through the Western District. Yeah, and created quite a bit of carnage as well. So that a lot of that obviously didn't come to light until later on, and I avoided that, thank God. But a lot of my friends and younger school kids didn't. So you can imagine what that did to a small country town.
did you realize that you might be gay back in that era, and you're like, and obviously you maybe didn't do anything about it?
For sure. I mean, you kind of just know when you're growing up um, what you're attracted to, even though it's not sexual. Um, and of course, playground, fun and all that sort of stuff, you gauge relationships and things like that. And you just know growing up that that's what you are. But yeah, obviously not a place to act on it when you're growing up in a small country town. So I certainly didn't act on it until I came down to Melbourne. God, when I was 22, 23.
So all of a sudden, here you are at school, and we're going to talk about your big career when you moved to Melbourne, but we'll get to that. But obviously, design was a big impact in your life. You're like, were you building, like little sets when you were a kid? Like, were you designing stuff at school a lot more than the other kids? What was happening there that you realized that, like design was going to be a big part of your life?
There was always puppets and little theatres and um, making little dioramas and all that sort of stuff. I got through most of my science projects by making prehistoric dioramas and of cavemen and things like that, rather than writing big lengthy essays. And so art was always a plus thing for me, and I always used it to my advantage. But yeah, there was always puppetry, and there was always theatre. Didn't get to see a lot of films, obviously, but a lot of kids' books and things like that. So yeah, just get lost in the pages of a kid's book is for hours, and lots of colouring, lots of drawing, yeah, lots of making.
All right, so here you go. You leave school, and then I don't know when you actually originally moved to Melbourne, but you become a window dresser. How did that happen? And window dressing, famously Myers, those Meyer windows, which are always been such a fantasy, and of course the Christmas windows. But why did you realize that you wanted to do something like that? And how did you actually get involved in? Because it would have been hard to get into that trade, wouldn't it?
I studied it for 2 years at a TAFE, and that of course had all sorts of other things like drawing and photography and fashion and all sorts of stuff involved. But I sort of fell into it. A few of my friends wound up at Maya, and so I applied and got in. It was a pretty amazing learning curve as far as the artistry of window dressing and how to lure people into buying things, and just, it was a very fun environment to work in, and obviously very theatrical, a lot of gay men, which was wonderful, at a really strange time in gay history. So a safe haven in a lot of ways, but a great place to learn and to pick up skills.
You said that you weren't really out until you ended up at like that department store that, and a high percentage of the window dressers and designers would have been gay, I'm guessing. Was it that cliched?
Yes, it was that cliche, but a lot of talented individuals that obviously did drag, and this was their day job. A lot of interesting people that had lots of other skills to offer, and this is how they earned a living. But yeah, I went through with quite a few artists that are still today, practicing their art form.
How long did you work there, and why? What was the main thing you learnt from it, apart from that, the illusion of a display? Like getting somebody drawn into to go in. Because I used to look at those windows at all the different department stores and go, they were such an art form, and you wanted to be part of that fantasy that was created in those windows.
Yeah, it's such a beautifully focused little slice of perfection, if you like. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing a food window or a fashion window or a homewares window. You just want to buy into how it's been put together. And a lot of times you don't even think of how it's been put together. But you see the beautiful crockery, and you see the beautiful linen and the fantastic cutlery. And you just think, I want that. And so there's a real art form to it. It started to die off a little bit towards 2010, maybe 2000. And it was all about merchandise and pushing merchandise and bulk stacks of merchandise, and mannequins became faceless, and the theatre started to drop out of it. And that's kind of when I sort of thought, oh, I'm over this. And so I left. I left after 10 years, and 10 years was a pretty good stint.
Were you planning an escape route that you could, where am I going to go now? Here's where I'm going to go. Or did you fall into a situation once you left the department store?
Another friend had moved over to the events field, because a lot of our skills in retail are actually quite transferable over to events, with that level of detail and the eye for things. So he was going interstate, and they were looking for someone locally in Melbourne. And so I jumped at the chance and started in the events world.
What sort of events did you work on? Were they big events, things that we would know?
They were very big events, a lot of stuff for tourism, a lot of stuff for drug companies, and for some big names that had a lot of money to spend on their employees. And so a lot of end of year things. But we're talking about designing circuses and jungles and temples, and you name it. Every couple of weeks we were designing something different, and we were working with puppets, and we were working with dancers and performers, and we had a real say in what the overall event was. And we just went rocking up with some props and plomping in the corner of a hotel. This was a real immersive experience for people.
Then you got even bigger, working on Spring Racing Carnival, and you were involved with a lot of the big installations at Crown. Is that still happening, or is that all dried up?
Oh, that's obviously dried up. I haven't done that for several years, but we were doing the fashion parades and things at Flemington, and designing the sets and stuff for that with their team out there. Yeah, it was just another fashion thing as far as I was concerned. But obviously there was a lunch involved, and there's table linen and centerpieces and all that sort of stuff, and displays. And so we used to hit it from all different sorts of angles to give a really good experience to people. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about people experiencing a little bit of glamour and a little bit of she.
When did the painting come into play? Were you dabbling a little bit as being a painter, a visual artist painter, or was that something that didn't happen until just recently?
I'd always done it since high school and dabbled and mucked around and learned various techniques and tried different things. But when I was working through Mara and stuff, I was maybe doing maybe 4 or 5 during the summer break, and that was kind of it. So it wasn't till I left the events thing back in 2011 that I got to concentrate on it and work on some of the smaller stuff that I was doing. And then, of course, with isolation, I really got to concentrate on it and go, okay, you've got a couple of months up your sleeve. What are you going to do? Let's do a self-portrait and see how you go. And so I used that time to really hone that, and I sort of surprised myself a little bit with what I came out with.
We'll come back to that because it is something that is happening right now. But this behind you is, like I'm guessing it's your lounge room that we're seeing. And as I said, you're a collector of stuff. And when we were chatting the other day, you were talking about op shops and going in, finding stuff, and you've taken that, which is the window dressing background that you obviously had, and you're taking it to another level where you actually create installations, and it virtually looks like an installation behind you as we speak.
It's a dusty installation, all right. The dust and the cobwebs are quite real. Most of the stuff there is actually from Charles Darwin, an exhibition that I did. So it was all skulls and cavemen to modern man and all that sort of stuff. And so it's just easy to kind of set some of that stuff up and leave it develop in front of you. But I'm always adding bits and pieces to it. So yeah, but op shops are a great way to find raw materials, especially if you're a young and up and coming artist. If you're working in textiles and fabrics, especially, they're a great way to find a dress or something, or a pair of pants, and draft a pattern off them and look how it's been put together. So you can actually learn quite a lot, and you can also source really amazing fabrics that you no longer see, like a fantastic wool from the 60s, and you can cut things up and chop things up for a few dollars. So they're a fantastic resource.
Let's just go back to the Charles Darwin exhibition, installation that you did. Why Charles Darwin? Yeah, I find him fascinating, and the fact that what he discovered and what he worked out, and then with and you being a Catholic, with his wife being a Christian, and she, like what he was going to tell her, like she was going to be devastated because, like God didn't create the world. Why did you pick him as a topic for the installation that you created?
Well, they initially called Darwin the man that killed God. And so I've also done an exhibition on Lincoln, and they were both born on the same day, which is kind of weird. But the Charles Darwin, there's always some sort of big moral question that I do or like to approach in these exhibitions. And obviously Lincoln was about slavery and politics and internal wars and stuff, whereas Darwin was about conscience and belief and science, like crashing headfirst into a religion. So that was really interesting to me. So I got to work with some of those themes and interpret some of those themes of Charles Darwin and the loss of his daughter and the loss of his faith, and put those into a really quite a large exhibition. And a lot of it was quite strange, and a lot of it was quite mysterious. So it was a great theme to work with. But I certainly like my exhibitions to have some moral question built into them, whether it's dealing with babies and science or yeah.
Where did you stage this exhibition, or do you call it installation? I'm calling it installation. You're calling it exhibition. What do you call it, and where were you staging them?
Those big ones were staged down in Colac at Copac, and every year they do a textile-based exhibition. And that approached me a few years ago, and I did some displays and stuff down there. But the last several years, I've kind of curated it for them as well. So Darwin was done specifically for COPAC, and great big 5-metre ceilings and black drapes and a truss rig with full lights and all the rest of it. So real theatre production. So I got to do great big sailcloths that had silhouettes of birds stitched into it, which was all backlit. And so it opened up a certain scale that I hadn't really been able to do before.
Wow.
And certainly technically, I was able to do a lot more with it, and I was able to sort of cut corners and go, okay, well, you're not actually going to see that because it's 3 meters in the air, so I don't have to do that. So it was like working in your own theatre pretty much, and that's a pretty big luxury.
All of a sudden, we're talking about COLAC. Like we expect an exhibition like that to be here in the heart of Melbourne, or like in Geelong, because the performing arts and visual arts are doing so well in Geelong now. Here we are in another regional town, and you're putting on like this exhibition. How was it accepted? And you, as you said, you curating now for all their a lot of their exhibitions. Is it welcoming? Like how's it all going in that respect with COPAC?
I was surprised. It was a textile, and I thought, oh, okay, there's going to be a lot of hand knitting and a lot of eco dyeing and a lot of just basic things that you think about. But the first time I went down there, I was like, oh my God, these people are really good. And every year I'm surprised at the amount of work that's done and the quality of work that's done down there. Some really cutting edge stuff, like people work with wire and fiberglass and polypropylene and just stuff that you don't consider to be textile. And they're weaving it, and they're doing incredible stuff with optical fibers, and it's real cutting edge stuff. And I don't know whether they could actually do something of that scale in town unless it was at a major gallery. But they're so lucky to have what they have as far as technically it's there. All the shows that tour through regional Victoria go to COLAC. And it's a real hub. They show films and theatre and musicians and all that sort of stuff. So it's a fully functioning theatre venue.
Were the numbers there? Did people come and see what you were doing? With the Darwin exhibition, like were people scratching their heads going, like, because people either know or don't know who Darwin is, and the story behind it. Like, how was it? It must have been accepted because they invited you back, and you're now doing more stuff with them.
They invite maybe 3 artists every year to do a major installation with several pieces, and every year it's quite different. Yeah, I think it was fairly accepted. It's a little bit out of the way. It's on a train line. It's on a B-line train line, so it's not totally hard to get to. I think they do the best they can with the press and stuff that they get. It doesn't have a big budget, so they do very well with what they do.
Would you like to? You said that it would have to be one of the major galleries that would do it here in Melbourne, something like you were doing with the Darwin exhibition. NGV, they've got Melbourne Now coming up in just over 12 months' time. Are you going to put your hand up and say, me, what about me? Like, I could deliver something here. Like, are you looking at wanting to do stuff like that?
Next year's a weird year. I'm not sure what's going to happen yet. So whether I need to go back to full-time work, because obviously the event industry is dead in the water at the moment. So I need to do something. Yeah, I like the intimacy of COLAC and the smaller exhibitions where people basically get up so close to stuff they can touch it if they want to. And I don't know how that translates to a bigger gallery, because a lot of my stuff is very one-on-one. There's a level of intimacy there between yourself and an object. So yeah, I'd have to think about that.
Are you filming it? Is there docos that you're doing with, like little stories of how you and why you're doing this or that? Because Andrew, you can't just let it, like happen and Colac know about it and the rest of the Australia and the rest of the world don't know about it. Come on. Is there docos that you're doing?
Not really. I share a lot of photographs and stuff on Facebook and Instagram and things like that. And a lot of the objects get photographed out of context, which makes them even more strange. But yeah, I don't push it obviously as hard as I should.
You should. You definitely should. So, what is your dream as an artist in that respect? Like it sounds as if you're happy to just plod along with what's it called again, Copac. Like is that as you said, you like it because it's small and people can get up close and personal, but that's happening more and more with the major galleries in the city as well. Is there one dream that you really would like to reach out and try to achieve in, say, the next 5 to 10 years?
I'm sort of happy going along how I am at the moment, and it doesn't. I don't have to make a living off it, so that changes what I make to a degree. I can make stuff that's never going to be sold because it's so left of center, or it's part of something much bigger. So I kind of like that being the driving force, is that I don't have to make a living out of it, and I don't have to show it if I don't want to, and I can sort of let things fall into my lap as they as they happen. So I might come across fabric and go, okay, well that's obviously for that, and this this object will work for this. And those exhibitions, the Darwin exhibition and the Lincoln exhibition, are kind of ongoing exhibitions that I could roll out at another time and add more to it.
And you're mentioning that you pick up a bit of fabric here and there, and so you do a lot of the sewing yourself. You're actually making. You were talking about the birds being lit behind on this canvas. So you're making all of that as well as coming up with the ideas, creating. You're making it.
Oh yes, it's a one-man show. I've had friends offer to help sewing and stuff, and it's kind of something I've kind of gone, well, thank you, but no, it's literally I sew everything and stitch everything because at the end of the day, that's what makes it mine, and that's what makes it human. If you're showing a cadaver or a dead body, but it's all hand stitched and it's all patched together and all the rest of it, people will look at that stitching and kind of will get the motive behind it, that it's not about scaring you and it's not about gore and it's not about effect. It's about trying to touch them in some way with what's been made and what's been put in front of them, and they need to work that out for themselves.
Like you're making the bodies there, but like they could be gory, and and I believe you're working on something with Dracula. I might be wrong there, or maybe I've given something away I shouldn't have given away. So who taught you? Who taught you to like do these particular stitches? How to sew? Like did you go to sewing classes or?
No, not at all. And that's the disarming thing, is that it's really basic stitch work. There's like maybe 3 different stitches, and you see them all, and they're as rough as billy. It's the disarming thing, because it's not fancy cross stitch, and it's not French lace knots and all the rest of it. Is really basically one layer of fabric stitched to another layer of fabric. But it's the fact that it's amazing fabric, and what it becomes is the interesting thing. It's not how it's been put together, because that's really quite obvious, but it's what it represents and what it means, and that's more important than any clever technique or fancy knot work or stitch work, because it's not fancy. It's quite, I tend to dumb it down a little bit to simplify it, so you can't describe it as a piece of patchwork or a piece of applique, because it's three-dimensional body, and that's not what applique is. So I take that technique and get rid of all the fluff and all the fanciness and just get back to the basics of it. And well, honey, you're looking at a blanket that's been chopped up, but it's a baby. But, work it out.
Let's move. You're in isolation, as we all are. Everyone else is are doing different things. You decided that you developed your painting skills, and you started doing some self-portraits. And that's when I noticed you through social media, and I was blown away by your paintings. They were excellent. And you're pretty much self-taught, or a few painting classes along the way, but again, you've self-taught yourself?
Pretty much self-taught, but obviously working in events, we sort of have a lot of scenic painting, a lot of paint finishes, and a lot of tricks and a lot of marbling and gold gilding and all that sort of stuff. So I use some of those techniques once again and dull them down. So I can obviously do a portrait in maybe 2 days rather than fuss over it for 2 months. And I'd rather get that spontaneity and get that happening quickly. And as it was, I was able to do 15 in a month, sort of one every 2 days, one after another. I didn't have to, one painting didn't have to say everything about me at that moment. So I had a chance to sort of pick 15 different aspects of my personality or my moods or whatever, and put that into each painting. So it was actually quite a luxury to say, okay, this one's about loss, and this one's about losing the family home, and this one's about losing a parent, and end of a romance. And so each painting actually does relate back to a specific thing that's happened in the last couple of years. It was great therapy from a personal point of view, but from an artistic point of view, it actually freed me up quite a bit to not stress so much about an outcome, just to enjoy the process of it, even though it was kind of rushed. And I'd set rules about, you have to do it in 2 days, even if it's not finished, that's where it ends. So I set myself little targets through isolation, and it really worked. I mean, if someone was to say, okay, you have 2 months to concentrate on your art, lock yourself away, I'd say, yay, great, let's do it. So I decided to use this time and look at it that way. And if I didn't feel like painting, I could always do some fabric stuff, or make some masks, or make a dressing gown or whatever. So I had sort of different levels of things I could do during isolation. It wasn't just painting and that was it.
Making a dressing gown, you're pushing the limits here all the time with me. Just I could not even think of where to start doing something like that. So here you are with all those paintings. You've got to do an exhibition, surely. You've got to do something. We've got to see them. You're not just going to have them on social media. What are you going to do with them? And do I have to nag you to put an exhibition, or are other people trying to push you into it, or are you actually saying, oh no, I'm too, don't come near me, I'm too important, and I don't want to show the world my art. What are you going to do with them?
I'm waiting to find the right place to show them, because it's actually not about the paintings as such. It's about how they're installed, because they're actually installed as one unit and they overlap and you can't see everything. So it hangs as a single piece, which is obviously represents me. So some of the paintings have been painted, the figures off to the right, or it's down lower in the bottom corner. Nothing is kind of where it normally would sit in the middle of a canvas. So it's an installation piece more than a painting sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Each painting, from what I can gather, is an individual painting of you. So how can it be one piece if it's all, or is it moving? You start at one end and you move through and you see all your different emotions. and it's scary Andrew, and it's even more scary Andrew, and like doubly scary Andrew. Yeah, is that what happens? Is that you follow it through and see your emotions? That's why it's all something together.
It's a clustered mess of feelings and emotions and perceptions about yourself, and so that's why a lot of it's some of it's not clear and some of it's hidden. So the installation is kind of an analogy, obviously, of me, um, and the paintings are kind of are a tool in it, if that makes sense. So it as an installation. Um, to have 15 paintings of yourself for a start is kind of like pretty wild. And then being able to display them in a different ways. They're not on a frame and they're not on a white wall. They're huddled together. There might be one on the floor, there might be one partially wrapped. The way you display things, obviously, and this is back to retail, can actually tell part of a story as well. And when I did some portraits for the American Civil War, I got to do a landowner and I got to do some slaves portraits. And when you think about it, there wasn't a lot of slave portraits done. But the way that was shown, as in the frames were really tatty, the frames were on the floor, and one was sitting in behind the landowner, things like that. The way you show things is equally as important as what you're showing. So that in itself is theatre and display, and so I use that as well. It's just as important as what you're showing, how you do it.
And have you got anywhere in mind that you would like to do this installation, or is it something that's just sitting there and when the right opportunity comes along? Because you just can't let it pass us by, though, the general public.
It's just sitting there waiting to happen, I think. The dysmorphia exhibition that I did for in January for Midsummer, it could have quite easily sat within that exhibition as a standalone piece, because that was all about body perceptions and sexuality and all that sort of stuff. So it could have sat in amongst that, and if I get to show that again, I'll probably add it to that.
Oh, okay. So it will become part of a collection. It won't be just that, your mood paintings. It will be like linked to to another installation. Is that what you're saying?
Or it could be part of a group show with portraits and things like that. But the fact that it sort of is kind of clustered together and not shown traditionally, it's kind of it'll fit in somewhere. I just need to find out where.
Just going back to Midsummer, what was that exhibition? Tell us about that. I didn't see it. I am aware of it because I've been following you a little bit on social media, stalking you. So tell us what that was and how was it accepted?
It was a little bit off centre. It was in a retail store, a fantastic store called Lord Coconut, which kind of is a Victorian sort of themed jewellery store, a lot of men's jewellery, which it's now gone. So it was kind of a little bit on the outskirts of Midsummer. Still some really important messages in it about identity and how you perceive yourself and not fitting in and things like that. So there was some quite sort of surreal fabric pieces for that. There was a self-portrait that was done for that on a jigsaw puzzle that was partially put together, which is a great metaphor. Pretty good numbers, I think. But I'd certainly like to add to that. There were a couple of larger pieces that I didn't get to do for that because of the timings. And I would certainly love to restage that one again because it's, so many important questions and things come out of how you perceive yourself, especially when you're a gay person.
I'm going to start lobbying you, Andrew, to push you to make you do it, and that way all those paintings that you did in isolation as well can be shown somewhere again. Andrew Delaney, can't wait to see where you're going to go next with your art. You undersell yourself, you underplay yourself, you're extraordinary what you're doing, and more people need to find out about what you're doing and how you're doing it and the reason behind. It's extraordinary. You're a very, very clever person and a real individual, even where you live, the warehouse that you're living in, that is your backdrop there. And you're down in Geelong. Andrew Delaney, can't wait to see where you go in the real near future. It's been a pleasure chatting to you today, Andrew.
Thank you so much, David, for your time. If I could say one thing, I just like to keep things so simple that everybody can get it. Art belongs to everybody. Everybody should experience it. Everybody should get something from it. And it doesn't have to be some weird blank canvas on a wall somewhere. Everybody should be able to get something from art, and art is so important culturally.
It certainly is. Andrew Delaney, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I'm David Hunt, and we will see you soon on Bent TV.